Hi, everybody. We are here in lesson 13 of My Agreements with Me for Believers. I am Sylvia Castillo.
I'm Desiree Duran.
And I'm Ray Tuggle.
Thanks for being here. We're talking about a rule for communication in this lesson. And, as you know, if you're listening to these, we like to start off in prayer. And so we'll go ahead and start there and bow our heads and start in prayer. So thank you, Heavenly Father. I'm so grateful to be in this word and in your word with Desiree and Ray, and for everybody listening. I'm so amazed and honored and just in awe every time we get together and I hear what you have to teach us. I pray in this lesson that we would just be open to continuing to hear your word, that we would be able to articulate and examine these places within ourselves where we need to look at our communication and how we're impacting other people or our own lives. And I know that you have all of the guidance and the wisdom for us. And so as we, pick this lesson apart, I pray that those who are listening, their hearts would be open to receive, and that their lives would be blessed for taking the time to listen to this. So you are a mighty God, and I'm so grateful for your word and for all that we are becoming and growing and learning in your word, and just so grateful for this time together. So I call this lesson good and great and already done. And I just give thanks as I release this prayer to you, knowing that you've got us covered. So it's in your son's name that I pray, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Man.
Right.
Wow. Just feeling the Holy Spirit just come on.
So a rule for communication. So we start out in this lesson saying, let no corrupt communication come out of your mouth, but only as, sorry, I need my spectacles on, but only as such for good of building up as fits the occasion, and that it may give grace to those who hear. And we were talking about that even in the last lesson. And sometimes was thinking back in my past how I remember even saying out loud, I'm not gonna walk on eggshells or talk a certain way so that someone else can not feel bad about what I'm saying. And being in the word and this whole journey that we're taking together has just completely shifted my thinking and the way I look at things and my perspective, and giving grace to those who hear. Man, it's just so much for me to turn within and look at in my own life and in the way that I communicate.
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah, well, because if not, what happens is it gives a foothold to the adversary, right? Because it can actually diminish. Because what happens is you want to take away any excuse that someone can actually point at you, right? It's like the Pharisees and Jesus. They wanted to continually poke at him and poke the bear and find out, who he was. But everything that came off, even though if he rebuked them, it still came off, with love and kindness. Or I mean, unless they deserved it, it was like you vipers and so and so. So I do believe there is a time and a place, a season for everything. So I think sometimes someone does need a very harsh rebuke when they're absolutely in the wrong. However, very far and few between.
Well, and I also agree with that to a point. Like I'm with you, Sylvia. I have not lived my truth in fear of hurting other people's feelings. Like that's how I was raised. That's how it was. And so I got to a certain age, which just very recently, um, where I'm like, I'm not going to hold back any longer. Like, I have a voice, I have thoughts, and people are going to hear it. However, I wasn't very responsible with that newfound freedom that I had to learn. Okay, yes, we don't have to walk on eggshells, because then for me, that means I'm not allowing, one, there's not a boundary there. Two, I'm not allowing myself to be my authentic self because of other people's thoughts and, feelings. However, I think I'm learning to communicate more effectively, and I still won't though walk on eggshells for people. Just because that I think that just that did me a huge disservice, you know,
Yeah, I,
in
I
my
think to
whole
clear,
life.
yeah, I think for me, I guess to clarify, I agree that we shouldn't walk on eggshells, but I think sometimes I was just not mindful about like how things came out of my mouth. And I think I don't know. I'm just that whole seeking to understand, whether that's for me or with other people. I'm just really wanting to be graceful. I just feel like I have the opportunity to bring love and light and perspective and calmness and goodness. Like I get to choose every day and every time something comes out of my mouth, how I'm going to do that, even when it's hard. And so that's, I'm just attempting to keep, keep looking, keep massaging that, keep being mindful of that as it relates to my communication.
And I think you guys are spot on, because look, it says in that verse, let no corrupt communication talk come out of your mouth, but only such as good for building up, as fits the occasion. Okay. As
Yeah.
fits the occasion.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
That it may be grace to the hearer who hears. Because also too, I do believe, and this is just me, and maybe you guys can correct me. However, I do know that men and women receive communication differently. Okay. And so a harsh word, okay, from a man to a woman, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, just can come off way different, and so and I don't know if that's relevant right now. However, for me, what I've found is that I cannot talk to my sister, my mom, my daughter, my girlfriend, the way that I talk to my friends as men, or my
Yeah.
brother, or and so is that relevant in this conversation?
I think so. Not to make it gender specific, but let's be real, we are made up differently. And I
Mhm,
think for men, men are very logical and men are
mhm,
not working off of emotion, where women, we're working off of emotion. So you tell us, if you spoke to us the same way you spoke to your male friends, guaranteed there's going to be some issues because men
mhm,
just hear things differently. Men are not taking offense. They're not
mhm,
holding on to a word that their buddies are saying and keeping it locked in a pocket, for years to come and then using it against you at some inopportune time. Let's just be honest. Women, we're going to do
mhm.
that. And I think with
Yeah.
us, especially if you're a woman who's broken or doesn't know your worth or your value, or you're not secure in who you are, especially then, you are going to receive anything negative. It's like you're looking for
Mm,
that offense. You're looking for that negativity because that's how you feel. But I
mm,
know for me, being a strong, independent, secure woman, I can receive things better now that I feel whole and healthy than I could have, 5 years ago. But still, if you come at me cross, for me now, I'm just gonna turn feisty and be like, "What?" And then I'm gonna come back at you, where before I'd
mhm,
be broken and victim and fall into this sadness and depression. So, I don't know, it's so different now. Where now I'm
mhm,
like, "I'll
mhm.
fight you back," you know,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
women, but at the same time, it still hurts, it still
Mhm.
stings, and it's still that defense mechanism where I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna get you back then." You know,
Mhm.
like revenge
Mhm.
That's
instead of sad Sally.
That's
Yeah.
so fascinating. I think that you make a good point. There's so much wisdom in what you're just saying about men and women and how we communicate differently. I think I've just gotten to the point, and maybe this is what I meant earlier when I was talking about eggshells, that like instead of being like, I'm going to fight back, I want to know why we're even fighting. Like,
Mhm.
that's just, I guess that's kind of just where I'm at in this whole experience. And
Yeah.
I guess we're all in different places. And that's another way that we know too, is the way that we talk to someone or what we're hearing back from them. Like I listen to the words and I feel like sometimes I almost know where someone's at in their growth or in their development by the words that are coming out of their mouth and what they're saying. I'm like, oh, well,
Mhm.
maybe they've not thought about that. Or, there's just something to learn from conversations like that.
Well, this
Yeah.
whole book, sorry, Ray,
No, no, go ahead.
the whole book in writing it, in learning this, because listen, we all are learning, but this stuff was not just pulled out of, the air. Like
Mhm.
these are life lessons. And so even learning the book has been, gosh, listen, it's been a game changer for me. It has
Mhm.
completely transformed my mind, my life, and learning this stuff has been such, I can't tell you. It's been the coolest thing. It's been
Mhm.
if it's been life-changing because I remember growing up, children, the way I was raised in this Hispanic culture, children were meant to be seen and not
Not
heard.
heard.
And so learning that my whole life and not having a voice, I never learned how to communicate. It was not something that was taught to me. But the adults in my life didn't know how to communicate either. They didn't know how to communicate with one another, nor did they know how to communicate to their children. And so having to come out of that and change that at such a late time in life, I mean, I'm not sad about it because it is what it is, and thankfully I've been able to change it and change it for my children. But man, if this stuff was taught to me at a young age and I wasn't just somebody to be seen and not heard, and I was actually able to have a voice and to communicate if I was feeling afraid or sad or,
Mhm.
happy or angry or excited, like I would have I would be so much further along in this life. Like, I remember, and
Yeah.
it's not just the bad things, it's the good things too. Like, I remember one time and I'll share the story. I lived with my grandmother, and this the Grammy Awards were on, and there was a song that came on. It was one of my favorite people who were singing it, and I started dancing, and I was so excited. And she's like, "Sit down. You're making too much noise. You're making a spectacle of yourself."
Mm.
And she just like shut that completely down. And my aunt stood, and was my Aunt Sandy, and she's like, just leave her alone. She's having fun. She's enjoying it. Let her dance. My grandma's like, she doesn't need to dance. We're watching a show. Just sit down. And I remember I felt shame and I felt embarrassment and I felt like unworthy. And that, and I was already a shy kid, but to do that was just it took so much courage, but then it
Mhm.
just shut me down all the way out again. Like it just closed me up all the way again. And it was debilitating. And I was not even in high school or middle school yet. So to go into that section and that arena of life was so difficult
Mhm.
because of that one incident. So communication, oh my gosh, this just opens up so much for me and so much healing, and it was just so good.
Well, so I think you make a great point because what happens is even in NLP, we realize that the imprinting stages are from 0 to 18. Okay. And a large portion of that percentage, 85%, is, when our values, our beliefs, and everything will be shaped. So when that happens, you then actually start to get into the not good enough, not worthy, all these things are imprinted. And our parents, by the way, if there's any parents out there listening, if you have young children or even children, now's the time to be more aware than ever that communication is literally programming your children, okay, to what they're going to believe about themselves and or others later on. Okay, I'll give you an example. So my mom, I was, I think, 7 years old. I came running home and I'm like, hey, mom, hey, I want to go play. There's a black boy down the street. I want to go play with him. Before I knew it, she popped in my mouth and she said, what is his name? And I was like in shock, like, I don't know. She said, well, go back and get his name. So I had to run all the way back down, come back and say, hey, came back and said, hey, okay, his name is Marcus. She says, well, we identify people by their names around here. You don't sit there and actually identify anybody by the color of their skin. That's ridiculous. And so I'm going to just say that stuck with me for a lifetime. So when I saw someone, I never identified them by, hey, their color. Okay. Because I just knew already that was something that that was instilled in me as a belief. And so just like with you, that moment will obviously determine who you're going to see yourself as, because we're children, we're young, we don't even understand, and so as parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles or anybody, this is why it's so important that how we communicate to young people or to others is so powerful, you know.
And
Yeah.
I think that's amazing that your mom actually explained it to you,
Yeah.
and that was great communication for her on her part, where there was no explanation for me. It was just
Yeah.
like, you did
Yeah.
something shameful, sit down, you
Yeah.
heathen woman. And guess what
Yeah.
now? Guess what I do now? We have dance parties all the time.
Yay! Because I
I
mean, isn't that the most incredible thing though, is that we're remembering things that happened like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, however long ago. And that's how important it is and how it's ingrained in us, those things. And
Yeah.
man, alive, the things that we have to heal from and get through because of a off comment or, she didn't understand that you're just expressing yourself. And what a wise woman that your mom was for her, because there's so much more than just about getting his name in that statement. Like
Yeah.
you go,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's such a profound life lesson
Yeah.
in what she taught you in that statement. But
Yeah, and I think this is actually very important because these are the root causes of what we're about to go into with gossip. So remember, because you have to hide what you feel, what you believe is true, you then start to get and actually realize that it's okay, that maybe I should, could, would. And so then when you start to look at something, instead of being courageous to say what you feel or think, you then start to get and actually identify and pluck away. And I think this is why gossip is so powerful, because you want to know more about other people's lives and you want to actually live out your own. And so we're just pulling and pushing. And so anyway, one of the things in here we talked about, was basically, is anything more secretly delicious than gossip, idle talk and rumors about others' intimate lives? What is conversation for, if not hush hush chatter about other people? Did you know? Did you hear? Guess what I discovered? Did you see online? So we're constantly doing what God said, which is to not compare one to another, but we're doing it all the time. And now even social media just, makes it so.
oh, this is so powerful because makes me want to ask the question. Do you think that someone who is not steeped in their vision and in their goals and actively working on those things that give them life and power and purpose, that they are probably possibly more in tune with all of the gossip and rumor mill and all that stuff, because they don't really have anything to focus on except for other people's drama and stuff, and that's what makes, at some level, makes them feel alive or excited or on fire, because they don't have anything about their own life to feel that way about. Like, that idea is a big deal.
Absolutely, 100%. Listen, when you are on living on purpose and when you have goals and visions and things that you want to accomplish in this life, you don't have time for that stuff. There's
Yeah.
no time for it. You're so focused on what you're like. I love, Joel Osteen would always say, stay in your lane. And I love that because when you are in your lane, that's the way you are going to, I mean, you only have your lane. Who cares what everybody else is doing? In the sense of like, you know, being happy for people. I think that's one thing. I mean, I don't know if sharing the good things in people's lives is, I don't know if that's necessarily considered gossip because it's not creating drama and, you're not trying to change people's minds about those people. You're just being excited for the good things that are happening. But when you're creating messes in people's lives by gossip, ugh, you need a life.
Yeah, I think
You,
it's the
you need a
intent.
life.
Like, what's the intent behind the reason for sharing? What's the motivation? We talk about motivation a lot. Like, what is the motivation behind? And I just think that gives someone the opportunity to like investigate their own stuff. Like, why am I sharing that? And do I have my goals and my stuff in order, or what is the purpose for me sharing this other person's stuff? And if I recorded it and that person knew that I was sharing, then would that change my share? Would that change me sharing their stuff? You know what I mean?
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So you have people out there, and this is very personal to me, but you have people out there who are writing and rereading and probably getting feedback. And when it doesn't phase them on what they're saying is untrue, hurtful, demoralizing, I mean, what do you do with those people?
The people that are writing it,
They're writing it and then they're getting feedback saying, "Hey, maybe you shouldn't say this. Maybe, that's not true." They're getting the feedback like you probably should not say that or stay in your lane, basically.
Mhm.
Like, I guess that's just the work, and not everybody's gonna do the work. I don't know.
yeah, I definitely feel that that's the work. And there's also people that are sitting in cheap seats, meaning that, they haven't done any work and they're just out there. That's the life that they live, and that's the words that they use. It's all negative and it's all, that might
Well,
be their whole life.
and so what I have discovered is that there's a lot of adult children, and that child is still acting out.
Mm.
Okay. So that's a protection mechanism, right? All of this, all of what we see that is negative, all of what we see is that comes across that doesn't bring grace to the hearer, or that isn't actually, soften our words or our approach. It's just hurt children, in that particular time frame. And so one of the things, the statement is, idleness is the devil's playground. So back to what Sylvia was saying, what you were saying is that, look, if you don't have purpose, you will fill it with something. And so the adversary knows that he can actually take that time. So in Proverbs 16:27, it says, an ungodly man diggeth up evil, and in his lips there is a burning fire. Okay, so it's what you look for, you will find. So if I want to look for negativity, I will find negativity. If I want to look for positive, I will find positive. So it goes back down to the heart of that motivation is, what is the purpose of why you're living? Why do you get up every day? Why are you in this relationship? Why are you working at this job? Why are you? And so what happens is, because we don't go into creating a bucket list, vision list for our life, and don't realize that we've never dug into what we actually want. We're living a lie. We're living a life that is a facade. So we then fill in the blank of, and the only way we know to do that is to look at everyone else, okay, and either find misery loves company, find fault in them, or be basically too scared and not courageous enough to actually speak our truth of what we want, and then go after it, and then speak life into it. So, so what you seek, you will find.
That's true. And misery does love company, because listen, I've been on that side where I've been a gossip queen too. There's been times in my life where I didn't like people and I was honing in on their misery, and that stuff brought satisfaction. I can be completely honest about that. And in the end, I mean, it was just me in this icky cycle of not being satisfied with my own life.
Mm.
So I've been on both sides for sure.
Yeah.
That's just
But
such huge awareness. It's to be able to see both sides of that coin, and to be able to say, I've been on both sides of that coin, to be able to notice both sides of the coin. And then, Ray, going back to what you said about the adult child acting out because of their own, imagine if we spoke life into that if we were grounded enough to be in the word, that we really listened and understood what he's trying to tell us as his children, and the impact that we could make on other people's lives, if we remembered that in those moments, like people are saying this, or they're showing up this way, and there's not even a reason for me to have to defend. Because I know, because I've done my own work and looked at my own evils and my own stuff that's hidden and in the closet, and all of those things allows me to see the truth about somebody else.
And so that's why there is no condemnation in Christ. So if we are to live like Christ, we see people as Christ sees people. He doesn't see the bad. He actually sees the good. Remember, here's the interesting point is that when we're saved and when we're born, again, and we're actually believers of Christ, there is no condemnation. So we are righteous. The problem is that we think that we're sinful. So what you put your attention on is where you put your focus. And so the key is that when we focus on the sin, we are basically less than. We are all those things. But when we realize that, no, we are righteous, we just happen to sin. Okay, we don't wrestle with that. Remember, the thing is that we are made perfect in his image. Therefore, we are righteous. But the problem is nobody's going to walk around going, I'm righteous. The thing is righteousness isn't a thing. It's a persona. It's an actual identity. And so the part is that we have to separate the sin from the sin, or the behavior from the person. And that's easier said than done. But when we can separate the behavior from the person, or the sin from the sinner, okay, then we see them as God sees them. We see us as he sees us. And so it's very important to not do what the adversary does, which is attach. Remember, the only time that you can actually really see yourself is when you detach from yourself. Well, the only time that you can actually really see another person is when you detach from them. Okay, because they too are hurting. They too are lost. They too are in their programs. They too have been shamed, guilted, and all these other things. And so I think for me, one of the things that my mom did teach me is that, seeing beyond the sin, seeing beyond the problem, seeing beyond those things, and being a forgiver, right? So in order to love someone, you have to forgive them. So there is no way to love somebody truly if you haven't been unconditional. And so that's where Christ comes from. It's unconditional. And that just means that you attach nothing else to that person and you see them as Christ sees them. Now, that's the flesh, that's the spirit talking, but the flesh will actually wrestle with that because I see their ugliness. I feel their ugliness. And so, okay, I'll say it like this. One of the lessons that I had to learn with Kristen when we were arguing was, I'm a feeler. I feel. So when she would say something to me, I would feel what she's saying. Okay. So you cannot be present. You cannot be an authentic listener if you're feeling what someone's saying. So instead, I had to realize I had to think about what she was saying and detach the feeling. Okay. So the problem is that what we're doing is we attach that feeling. And so all of a sudden now, I'm thinking about myself. I'm feeling what I'm feeling. So it's a quick switch of the hands, right? Switch of the process. So just like gossip, it's having an opportunity to go, do I gossip at that moment? Or do I realize that, am I feeling what I'm seeing? Or am I actually thinking about this? And so remember, thoughts become things. And until you actually think and change your thinking, if you're feeling, you've already passed your thinking. And now you're actually going to go into behavior.
Yeah, because there's no logic in your emotion.
No.
So the 3 greatest questions to ask.
Yeah.
Ask a true friend, do I have a tendency to gossip? Number 2, ask yourself, who are the gossips in my life? And number 3, ask the gossip, why are you telling me this? And I'll tell you, over the last few years, I've used number 3 so many times. Like, why do I need to know this? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
How is this going to change my life? How is this going to change your life? Right. And people really get offended. The gossipers get offended when you ask them, why are you telling me this? So I don't know. It's so interesting. Gossip is such an ugly thing, which is why God tells us to not do it.
Well, and go to the source. We talk about the 24-hour rule in here. And this is why a lot of times this comes into being, because here's what happens. So what I use is, like, if someone comes to me as they talking about someone, I'm like, okay, cool, let's call them up. And they're like, whoa, hey, no, it's all good. I'm like, well, then shouldn't they be in on this conversation? The 24-hour rule is, look, have you talked to this person? Have you addressed this with that person? Have you sat there and actually did that? And when did this happen? Oh my gosh, we're talking a week? Like, seriously? Do you understand? A snowball starts off like this, but the more you roll it, the longer you roll that the bigger it gets. So that's why it's so important to get next. And then, by the way, also too, what's that bird or whatever you say with one thing, and by the time it gets down to the other last person, it's totally changed. What is it?
A parrot.
Well, parrot mocks it back, but they call it the oh gosh, I forget. But anyway, it's where you tell one person and then 20 people down, it's totally a different story. We
call that, as girls, we called that the telephone game.
Okay. Yeah. So the point is that the 24-hour rule is such a wise, mechanism to use, because, man, you got to clear it up, figure it out,
So repeat that rule again.
Yeah. So the 24-hour rule is basically, so if you fall into a situation where you're either offended or you have these questions rolling up, as in like guessing something about somebody, assuming something, then instead of actually allowing that to actually take on growth and be seeded and watered, if I hear something about Desiree, and someone told me that, if I hear it and accept it and leave it alone, I haven't done the 24-hour rule. Now, if someone tells me that, I say, hey, look, instead of talking about Desiree and you have this issue and you're telling me about it, first of all, like you, why would I want to know this? What does it have to do? You need to call Desiree and get that squared away and deal with her. In 24 hours, it's because, one, you may not even be aware of what you did. Okay. Right. So it's just 24 hours is, for the most part, like, to be able to sit on it, think about it, let the emotions die down, and allow yourself to be very grounded by the time you actually readdress it.
So I just like to jump in at this point because I think a lot of times, especially
Yeah.
in these conversations, because it's going to take some courageous conversation. It's going to take
Yeah.
someone being real with themselves and their feelings to even have the idea of addressing someone or something that they feel offended by within 24 hours. And not only that, what I hear is like, well, how would I even do that? So my
Mhm.
little 2 cents about that would be, if you're going to have this courageous conversation, it's like, hey, Des, we know we were talking yesterday and this is what I heard,
Yeah.
whatever it was. And this is how it made me feel. And I just wanted to touch base with you. I just, cause cause whatever reason, you may not have meant it the way I heard it, or I might've heard something you didn't even say. And I just want to make sure you and I are good. Cause I always want to be on the same page with you. And that idea or that conversation is going to allow those people or me and you to have a conversation so that I can, leave that conversation feeling completely different and not offended and not in judgment. And then I have nothing to go gossip about to someone else or have someone else try to figure out something that they can't even give me feedback on because they're not you. So
Mhm.
such a big deal. Could save so much heartache, stress, time, energy if we are just real with the people we need to be real with.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is really huge just because we're in a time, probably more than I've ever seen, where bad news sells, right? And so, like gossip and all these things, we're watching more reality TV than we've ever watched. And so, it says here, hence why negative or bad news sells. According to St. Augustine, a lie, gossip, or rumor has two elements: a divided heart and a will to deceive. A divided heart is an inconsistency between one's mind and expression. A lie, gossip, or rumor is expressing what we know in our hearts not to be true. It's a calculated attempt or insecurity to mislead. We deceive God, others, and ourselves when our words and actions contradict what we know to be true. It is the ultimate test of our integrity. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. So social media is an outstanding example of this. How many times how you commended or responded, usually by emotion, thinking you were justified or right about something and later found out you were wrong. So I think, when Facebook first came on board, when people were posting something, I realized that I would get emotionally charged and go make a comment to then go find out that it actually wasn't true. So then you kind of feel stupid. And so because I didn't actually seek to find out whether it was or not by going to the source.
So I guess that's
You
the
know,
takeaway. That's the nugget from this. Go to the
yep,
source. Go to the
yep,
source. If you have a challenge, you need to communicate, you want to use the 24-hour rule, go to the
yep,
source. The
yeah,
10 other people that you want to talk to cannot figure out or give you the solution the way the source can.
yeah. And I'll end it with this. So one story for me is that I thought I was doing the right thing when I first married, and I was working, going to school. However, I was neglecting my wife and her needs. Okay, and I didn't know that, and she didn't express that. However, she would tell her neighbors, okay, and tell everybody else. We'll go to find out. I ended up going to officers training school, and while I was there, I got a call from my commander that she had a U-Haul truck packing up our stuff and leaving. Okay, so wasn't tragic enough, but when I got back, I think the thing that stuck with me the most is that when I went and finally confronted the neighbors, each one of them knew her story, each one of them knew her pain, each one of them knew stuff that was going on, and I felt so bewildered because I just wasn't plugged in to get and actually find out why. However, she didn't feel secure enough to tell me because there was something that I was doing that didn't allow that. So a lot of times, and so I guess for me, the greatest lesson is to go ahead and actually be very attentive, and then also to be careful who you're confiding in when, if the person's in front of you, it's your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or child, they're not invisible, and we get so busy. We need to stop and really just communicate what's going on with them. And I think it's very important to really, like I said, go to the source instead of actually turning to everyone else. And at least, if anything, confronting the source can at least let you know where you stand, right? So I think the thing that I took away was, I'm only as good as the information I'm given. And so if I'm not given an opportunity such as truth, or to speak my own version or my own story of truth, then we rob people of that. And it's really a tragedy.
I agree. Very good.
Yep. So, all right. Well, thank you guys.
All
This was a
right.
good one.
See you in the next lesson.
All right.
Bye.